Welcome to On the Table, a podcast about board games, card games, and tabletop war games.
Hey, it's Chase from On the Table Gaming, and in this episode, we got a special treat. We're going to be hearing first up from a coach's corner from Mark Rupp to talk about A Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game, and some interesting ideas around getting to use Skinchangers in your free folk forces more. But then after that, we're going to be talking with the creator of a really cool game called Clear the Decks. And so if you were interested in hearing about Clear the Decks, it's an amazing indie game that I got a chance to play at Captain Con. You're going to want to jump to about 7 minutes into this podcast, and that's where our interview there begins. Otherwise, catch our Coach's Corner here at the beginning, and then stay on for the interview. It's a great one. If you've ever thought about designing your own game, there may be some nuggets of information there that'll help you get an idea of what that experience is like. And so without further ado, let's jump on into the Coach's Corner. We've got the well-known, the somewhat legendary Mark Rupp. Mark, thanks for joining us for Coach's Corner.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chase.
So you've been running some free folk here. I know you're well-known for your neutrals, but you run some free folk, and you're talking about some combos today that we might want to consider, and you're going to be working with Harma. So what is this combo that people might consider trying out in their free folk lists?
Yeah, so I've been digging around with Harma because I just haven't played her much in 2021 rules, and I wanted to get her to the table more. So I was looking at ways to kind of abuse what she's got, and one of her kind of more useful abilities here is superior flanking, right? So you need something on a flank that's dealing damage. So looking for things that have easy access to flanks, one of the things that came up was Skinchangers and the bears, because just by nature of how the bear functions, he attacks flanks. So at that point, I had to figure out how to make use of Skinchangers, which in 2021 have kind of been underwhelming, to say the least. I mean, they're a far cry from what they were pre-2021, we'll say. They have their utility, but they're not what they used to be. So one of the trickiest things with Skinchangers is the nature of how they function, where you have to choose what they do at the start of the round. So you have to kind of telegraph what you're going to do with them in the case of the bear in particular, before you ever get a chance to use the bear. So how do you get around the fact that you have to declare a bear at the start of the round, then you have to get engaged, and then you have to get engaged before you activate, all sorts of little tricks to actually get it to work. So my thought was, don't put the Skinchanger in the unit that you want to engage, put the Skinchanger somewhere safe, get a different unit to engage, and then leverage the free folk cards to actually make it all work. So the particular list that I've been looking at, I've got Harmony unit of Spearwives. Where she's at doesn't matter too much, but for this particular list, she's hanging out in Spearwives because it's themey and that's where I wanted her. Then I've got my Thens, which are kind of the new staple now that Spearwives have been nerfed. They go on a lot of my lists. And so I've got my Thens with a Raid Leader, Harma's Bannerman. And then I've got Trappers with a Skinchanger in there, some Savages with an Alpha, a Chariot, Craster Val, and Mance. That's the full 40-point list. So my Skinchanger, just to kind of give the rundown on this particular trick, Skinchanger, start of the round, chooses bear. Thens, hopefully, being what they are, get engaged before having activated, because that's kind of how they function, what you want to be doing. So under the assumption they manage to get them engaged, you pull Regroup and Reform. So part of Regroup and Reform lets you swap two friendly attachments. The first part of it, where you move attachments, explicitly states that you have to maintain normal attachment restrictions, but the second part does not. And because of that, there's just some interesting little interactions that you could do. One of which is swapping Harma's Bannerman for any attachment. So when you build a list, you've got your Raid Leader and Harma's Bannerman in the unit, but then you can swap Harma's Bannerman with a different attachment, and at that point, you don't have to maintain normal attachment restrictions because the card doesn't say you have to.
Oh, I like where this is going.
So Thens get engaged, start a turn, you play your Regroup and Reform, you swap Harma's Bannerman for the Skinchanger after having declared Skinchanger Bear. You then activate your Thens. You immediately get to deploy your bear in the flank of your target. The Thens have their Raid Leader, so the bear gets to swing with 2 attacks on 2s rather than the standard 1 on 3s, which is sketchy at the least. Now that you're attacking the flank, Harma then gets to trigger her superior flanking. You get your 2 tokens on the unit. You swing with the bear, hopefully get your 2 wounds in. Then the Thens get to then trigger their order. You get your 2+3 hit or 2+ ranked hits. And then the Thens get to attack after that. And since the bear is there, the Thens also get to benefit from Raid Leader. So you're swinging 8 dice on 3s. All of this without having to get another unit involved. Like it's a self-sufficient, self-running raid leadering unit.
Yeah, and it does depend on the tactics card regroup and reform, but that's a good combo to have, like ready at your fingertips to go. That's pretty devastating.
Yeah,
and I feel like you catch your opponent by surprise with that too.
Oh yeah. People definitely don't see that one generally coming. They'll like maybe avoid the unit that has the Skinchanger because of the threat of the bear, like avoid engaging. But since you can move the Skinchanger anywhere that you happen to have an engaged unit, granted the Thens is definitely a best target, so you're going to try and do it there. But really, you can do it anywhere. And beyond that, I mean, if the trappers get engaged and you've declared bear, you can deploy the bear, swing with it. If they don't kill it, you activate it, swing again. And then if they manage to kill the bear before you get around to activating your Thens, you then, as far as I think the rules work, you can move your Skinchanger over to your Thens before they activate Thens, redeploy the bear because he's died. I have at least confirmed that you can't redeploy it if the bear hasn't died, but if the bear does die that round, you can redeploy it, reactivate it, and get your free swing. So Skinchanger is all sorts of weird, but he has some really interesting interaction. The other really kind of neat interactions he's got in there is that since he starts in the trappers, your trappers now have an effective 14-inch trapping range. Because at the start of the round, you're going to pick a unit within 14 inches. And then when that unit goes to take its maneuver or march action, you can shift within trap range and then trap.
Oh, interesting.
So Skinchanger double function in that particular list. So that's part of why I like him in there. And then also, since you're running Spearwives and Trappers, you got that coordinated assault nonsense. So you can share charging volley and get your Trappers to actually get some pretty decent damage output with the shot charge combo.
That's pretty crazy. So, I mean, this is a fun one to try out. So if you're listening for our Coach's Corner segment this week with Mark, see if you can get this Then Warrior Skinchanger doubled up with Raid Leader combo off in one of your games and let us know how it goes. And Mark, thank you so much for sharing your tip.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks much.
And I also got my buddy Bryan here joining us today. Bryan, thanks so much for coming on. Let's get right into this interview. So not too long ago, Bryan the Builder and I, who is joining us on this episode, went up to Captain Con. And, we went up there for a Song of Ice and Fire tournament. And he was playing a War Machine tournament. We got to do some demo games of Conquest. And we're really up there looking at miniature wargaming. And there was this one game that really caught our eye and stood out to us. And it was a game that actually wasn't a war game. It was a cooperative card game for 1 to 4 players. And this game, Clear the Decks, is what we're going to be talking about today. And we are joined by Chris Pinyan from Crispy Games Co. Thank you so much for coming on to talk with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Let me set the stage here a little bit more. So we're walking around and there's like all these like towering miniatures and things like that. And you've got a booth set up where you're running some demo games. And so we got to sit down, Bryan and I, side by side. And, imagine there's a frigate out in front of you, like a ship, and it's on a card. It's a flattened out 2D dimensional on cardboard. And there were stacks of cards across the top of the ship. And then you sit down and in front of you is a playmat. And I think we had some deluxe components there. There was like a neoprene little playmat with 3 slots for different types of cannons. And to my right was Bryan, and he got his own playmat as well. And we're facing this frigate out on the open waters. And we've got 3 cannons each. An 18-pounder, a 24-pounder, a 36-pound cannon, and it's sink or swim. And so anyway, I started blasting, and literally, I had a blast. And I want to be completely honest about this episode. I am more of a war gamer, and I love going for the miniatures stuff. And this game, out of that whole convention, which I went up to really for wargaming, was the game that I left thinking about and wanting to play. And that's why I'm really just so excited to talk to you about this. So. Let's jump in and talk about this game that you have designed and self-published by taking it to Kickstarter. So, Chris, before we jump into that, what was your path to gaming? Like, what was your entry point to this hobby?
So I'm from a family of 8 kids. I'm number 2. I have an older brother and then a whole slew of brothers and sisters after me. And we grew up playing games all the time whenever we could. Summers, we went to the park around the corner and they had a big game closet, and that's what we did all morning. And the other thing I remember now is with 8 brothers and sisters, there's a lot of birthdays. So there were also a lot of games coming in every year. and we had the standards, we had Risk and Monopoly and Sorry. And even those three off the top of my head are all highly competitive, ground everybody, pound everyone else into the ground kind of games. And my older brother's 4.5 years older than me. So I tend to lose a lot.
Oh, no.
Now, I don't know if that led me 30 years later to lean towards a cooperative game.
Mm-hmm.
But so, that was the childhood. I got into Dungeons and Dragons as a teenager and played that and wrote a lot of my own modules with my friends, make sketches of dungeons and things. Then flash forward, I don't know, another 10, 15 years or so. My wife knew I liked Dungeons and Dragons, and Wizards of the Coast came out with their painted plastic miniatures.
Yep.
And so she thought it would be nice to buy me a box for my birthday or something. And lo and behold, it was based on a game, or there was a game around it. So I started getting involved in that. Went to Gen Con a couple times in the tournaments and found that there were these game conventions all around me. I live in Morris County, New Jersey. So down the street in Morristown, there were 3 every year. And one of them is called Metatopia. And in that is just for playtesting games that people have created. And I went through, I tried some other people's, handmade and pre-published games. And I was like, yeah, maybe I could make something. So I made something that was like a knockoff on Mealborn, if you've ever played that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically a traveling game with obstacles thrown in your way. But the one that I really was trying to focus on was a game called Clear the Dragons, which was, fantasy based with, you would have your mix of characters. Every player had their own mix of characters, and you were trying to knock down dragons with riders on them.
So kind of the clear segue from your love of D&D here.
Yeah. You go with what you know. And as part of Metatopia, you play test, and you can have, I think they call it like a master test or something like that, where you're getting somebody, maybe a game store owner, somebody else who's published, people who really know games. And they didn't really like it.
Oh, no.
They're like, well, there didn't seem to be a lot of choices. And it kind of was like what the cards that you got would dictate what you could do. And we all did pretty much the same thing. And it was a little lucky who happened to get a couple more points than somebody else. So I was like, and that's anybody who wants to work on their own game. You got to have a thick skin. It's like somebody telling you that your kid is lousy at Little League after you spent all summer, paying for back.
Well, worse, right? Because this is your games.
Yeah. So that was rough. And, I was looking at it and I was like, you know what? They're right. You have to take a step back. There's some people use that phrase too much, but you have to step outside of yourself, try to be as objective as possible. And how is my game different? And why would somebody want to play this game versus any other game that's got dragons and fighters and clerics and everything? And, I realized it wasn't that differentiated. The other thing that you hate to hear is, oh, have you played such and such a game? Because it's a lot like this.
Oh,
have you? And I forget, Thunderstone maybe was the one somebody said, and something else. And I'm like, no, I never played it. And at this point, I don't want to because, it'll make me feel even worse. So coincidentally, I had always liked the movie Master and Commander, the, sailing ships, Napoleonic with Russell Crowe. And my mom's an avid reader. She had mentioned at one point that it was based on a series of books. So 20 books. And I don't know how far I was along in the series. I was enjoying it. That whole thing is cool to me. And, well, there's a lot of different people, a lot of different tasks, the battles that they fight. There's a lot of strategy and tactics, and it's not all cannonballs. It's this other kind of ammunition. And, even in the movie, there's a lot going on. I'm an engineer by education, and the logical physicality of it kind of resonated with me also. Not to knock fantasy, but, for example, a lightning bolt doesn't work on a blue dragon. Why? Because I said so.
Right. Magic. It's magic.
Yeah. So as opposed to a cannonball is not going to destroy a sail because it's just going to poke a hole in it. And that is something physical, logical, and that everybody can understand and get on board with. So when I took Clear the Dragons and, now that you've played it, if you say, okay, well, instead of instead of a fighter, cleric, and a wizard, I've got an 18, a 24, and a 36 pounder. Mm-hmm. And instead of using a sword, an axe, and a bow, I've got round shot, chain shot, grape shot. And now, instead of certain monsters and whatnot, I've got different parts of the enemy ship, and different combinations of characters and weapons will affect different combinations of monsters. So, my first game was a precursor, but when I started making it more physically relevant, it clicked for me more. It made more sense. And the fact that I was really into the subject matter made it very easy. And, somebody starts talking to me about it. I'm like, oh yeah, it's this and this and this. And here's why this happens and why this happens. And it's fun to talk about the subject matter as well as explaining, why things happen.
It was like your dress rehearsal for the real game was, all that preparedness.
Right. And also when you're trying to, obviously I still have a lot of copies. When you're trying to, sell a game, the more interested you are in it, hopefully the more interested prospective buyers will be interested in it. If you go, oh, there's Othello, and you're going to flip this disc back and forth, okay, as opposed to, well, there's guns firing and things falling over and people, all this stuff. So that's really, that was the evolution of Clear the Decks. And in the beginning, it never occurred to me to make it competitive. Mm-hmm. I sat down and once I started working on it, I was like, well, everybody's firing at the same ship, and that was probably the number 2 question I got was, it's great. This is a cooperative game. Are you going to make it player versus player? The number 1 question was, where are the pirates?
Oh yeah, of course. Right. When you think of
and that's also, a little bit of a marketing and probably pride aspect was, Master and Commander, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the golden age of piracy. Mm-hmm. It was pretty much at the tail end of it. Thinking back about all the books, they probably went after some Corsairs or something, but it wasn't. It was about Navy fighting Navy. So that's what the game was set up to be. And I also specifically did not make it country specific. It's not Britain versus France or U.S. versus France, but I mixed in different uniforms. My first artist was great. We mixed in different uniforms, different countries. I used some different phrases just to make it as neutral and fill in the blank as possible.
So, I guess you've gone into what inspired you, but really, how do you sell this? What's your elevator pitch for Clear the Decks?
Oh, so I'll take a breath.
Sure.
Yeah. Clear the Decks is a solo to cooperative naval combat war game set in the Age of Sail. Each player has a set of 3 cannons that they use different kinds of ammunition. They use Marines and tactics and officers to attack a single enemy ship. So all the players are working together. The enemy ship, you get to pick what size and difficulty it is. So you can pick one of 9 difficulty levels. So you can start off something simple to learn the game, or with younger players, you can work your way up to a much larger, much more difficult ship. And the enemy ship is going to be made of structures and cannons and crew. And then we throw in events and fortunes that kind of, mess things up or help you out when you least expect it. Like I said, it's country non-specific. I like to say it's a family-friendly war game. You are shooting an enemy ship, but nowhere in the game or in the rules do I say the word kill.
Right.
There's none of the cards have blood and guts spilling out all over the place. And because it is a naval war game, it's not pirates. So there's no buxom pirate girls hanging out all over the place. And at its core, it is a, evolving puzzle game. You've got 3 sizes of cannon. You've got 3 types of ammunition, and all the cards you're shooting can be destroyed by certain combinations of those. So, even a 6 or 7-year-old, if you know the 3 numbers and you know the 3 letters and you can see them on the card, you can play.
And I think that's actually one of the things that stood out to me initially too, was that, it's a great game that I can play with my wargaming buddies, especially those that are into historicals, and they'll jump in for the theme. But this is also a game that I can easily see myself busting out with family or like friends who are not super into like competitive games. And, I can just tuck this in my bag, and it's a great, just sit down cooperative game. It's relatively easy to learn. I mean, when we were at Captain Con, how long was that demo? I mean, we were clipping along pretty quickly. How long does you normally take for you to run like a demo of it?
So I try to keep demos to around 30 minutes.
At most
that
we were like events, actually playing though. Like it was, you gave us the basics, and there were a few things that popped out that were like, like here you go. But it wasn't like 30 minutes of instruction.
No. I think I've kind of honed it and that was the first event I had done in 2 years. So the first couple people I'm talking to, I'm like stumbling over it again. And I'm like,
you could have fooled us, man.
What did I used to say back in the day? But I can pretty much explain how to play in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And all those other specialty cards you can deal with as they come along. Mm-hmm. And even in terms of, with younger players, you could take all of the officers out of the game and the game still plays. You could take all the Marines out and the game still plays. And that was something that I learned at one of the seminars was, they said, when you're creating a game, create it in its most simplest form first. So just guns, just ammo, and just shooting. And then, because if it doesn't work that way, you have a real challenge to add things to fix it, and you don't want to be fixing your game all through development. You want the core to be solid, and then you want to put all these other things in to heighten the enjoyment and the tension and whatever else.
I think that's actually a really key point. So kind of the takeaway then is that if you are designing a game yourself, if you've got a problem and the way to solve the problem is by adding things, then maybe there's that's a much bigger problem than you realize.
And after the first real playtest I did at Metatopia with this one, somebody pointed out a very fundamental flaw, and I had another test, a couple more tests the next day. So I was home that night, scribbling on more cards. I'm like, how can I fix this? How can I fix this? Came up with 2 options, one of which, involved more stacks of cards and adding cards and this and that. And, again, making a bad situation worse or making it overcomplicated. The alternative was that leak card. So I did add a couple cards to the game, but kept only a certain number of stacks. Took care of that problem that they pointed out. So I can't emphasize the importance of having perfect strangers try your game.
And Bryan, so out of the 2 of us, I'm more of like a theme sort of guy. To be totally frank, when we were walking by, I saw the ships and I was like, ooh, like what's this? And that pulled me in. Bryan's, you're the go-to mechanics guy. We've gone to some conventions. They'll be like, it's a game. It's like just moving dice or something. And I'm like, what? Like, where's the imagination or the stuff? And he'll be like, no, the mechanics are so cool. So Bryan, what was it? Was there a mechanic or anything that you really liked that stood out when we sat down to play?
Well, I like how it sort of married the 2. Like the mechanics were very close, sort of selling the sort of the naval combat. That's what really was kind of strong to me. It's like, oh yeah, you've got multiple, you're firing at different parts of the ship, and you got different cannons, and you've got different things happening on that ship separately. So really, I felt like what was really impressed me was how it sort of definitely. The theme was sort of built into all those mechanics and very well sort of tightly coupled together. As you were saying before, you had dragons before and you're firing different spells or what have you. You had different colored dragons or different monsters or what have you. And it's like, okay, you're making the mechanics work potentially. And it could be a great game. I'm not saying otherwise, but it's like when you suddenly have this sort of, oh no, there's mechanics just like, oh, it fits exactly the theme. That's when it seemed like you've really got something. And that's what I really liked about the game. Is that it sort of?
Yeah, because even starting off like firing the cannons, that was cool in itself. But then when it was like, oh, like now there are additional sort of like tactics cards that come out that we can now further customize things. The officer cards, and that's a really cool way to like scale it upwards.
Yeah, and I have to hand it to, I like to do some shout outs. So I was showing it off at my closest friendly local game store. It's a place, Highlander Games in Boonton, New Jersey, showing it to the owner there who had, encouraged me all along the way. And he was playing it out. I was just quickly showing it, and I said, "Oh, you could do this or that." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, because everybody likes to have choices." And that was like a light bulb moment, because until that time, the officers, Marines, they only had one action, one thing to do. And I was like, yeah, you know what? It would be nice, officers, these guys are important. They're smart. What if they had a choice of what to do? Then I had to, think of another 7 things for all these different cards to do. But, that offhand remark, you out of the 100 comments that you get, that that's ridiculous. No, that's a different game, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden one hits you. Oh, yeah, that would make the game way better than it is.
And that builds off in that theme mechanic. Like, it fits pretty well. Like, it's easy to build out there. Especially,
and with the officers, it's choices between a resource selection and an attack, choice, which is, a big part of the game. Are we gonna shoot, or are we gonna rebuild? Do we shoot at the thing that's shooting at us, or do we shoot at the thing that's adding more cards to the enemy ship? I'm big with my kids and everybody on consequences. Yeah, you can do this. Go ahead. And when I was, showing you guys and anybody else who comes up, I try to teach. Then you pull back a little bit and you wait for that moment where it's like, I just want to let you know, you could get rid of this. You're going to get rid of this card. That's fine. But here's something, you're not familiar with the game. Here's what's going to happen if you do that.
Right. Or I fired all my cannons and now.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to have, careful. You're not going to have anything to shoot next turn.
I feel like you might have said that to me. Now I'm having a flashback to was I the child in this situation?
At one point in every demo, I have to, make that comment.
So if and when you design another game, potentially, what do you think, given the experience you've had with this, do you think you'd, again, lead with the theme first, or do you think you'd lead with the mechanics?
I definitely think I'm a theme person.
Okay.
And it's really, as far as being interested in, I would pull inspiration from the theme.
Yeah.
So a guy found me online or something like that, and he's having me consult on a game idea that he had. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It's more of like a word and literary game. So I think it's clever and it's fun. I don't know if I could see myself going to a dozen game conventions and hawking it and trying to play it over and over. Mm-hmm. So, some people have asked me about reskinning. Which is very common. Like, what do you got? Like Munchkin and Castle Panic and Flux, all those things. So Monopoly. I've tinkered with, okay, well, what if these were spaceships? Mm-hmm. Some people don't like sailing ships. There's a whole big space thing out there. So to what extent would I just carbon copy it, as opposed to what do I have to change to make it not exactly the same? Right. Bring in things that are more space oriented. Somebody was like, oh, you also have like World War II battleships. And I'm like, well, yeah, but then you're going to throw out grape shot and chain shot.
Yeah.
So I think some of it is also the romance of the period. You weren't using laser guided, so you weren't going to hit all, So I have also tinkered with making this player versus player. How many cards can I reuse? What cards would I have to get rid of? When people ask me about it, I'm like, well, you could buy 2 copies and just play 2 solo games at the same time. You both fire enemy ship attacks. You both fire enemy ship attacks. And, whoever wins first, or keep going until the other guy loses. Nobody's taken me up on that yet. But, tell your friends.
That's kind of one of the challenges, though, right? I feel like that was one of the things, Bryan, you were speaking to, was the mechanics really fitting the theme. When you get your chain shot and you're trying to shoot down the sails, like that fits so perfectly. And I guess, if you did a sci-fi reskin, you could have, super laser beam that like penetrates the hull, but it just works so well with what you've got. And I guess it's not impossible. And maybe down the line, you'll do something like that, but it does fit really well here. And I think that was what most grabbed my attention too, is immediately as we started playing. It's a card game, flipping over the cards and moving things around, but it also sort of made sense just by being like, well, this is like how it should work. Like if you're trying to think of like a historical perspective and you're like, okay, I want to be shooting at these things and doing these things. And like, there's like you were speaking to, there's a real world logic where you don't maybe get in a fantasy game. And I thought that was so interesting that you said that when you're talking about like, lightning bolts, because I feel like a lot of people I talk to with games are like, oh, do a fantasy setting. Don't do historical, because the fantasy setting, there's like limitless possibilities and you can just make up whatever you want. Whereas in historical, like you got to think of how it actually works. I really thought it was interesting that you were essentially looking at it like in a very different perspective on that.
Certainly you have to take a little bit of poetic license.
Yeah.
If you see the game, you look at it. I use the nautical flags throughout the game. I really wanted to make it look nice. You said, am I going to do another one? I don't know, but I wasn't sure at the time if I ever would. So I at least wanted this one to look nice. So we used the nautical flags everywhere, and the 3 cannons. I wanted to use the numbers, the number pennants. Now, 18 and 24 were very common gun sizes. 32 was the next, but I'm like, well, I already used the 2 and the 24, so I'm going to make this 36. So all the flags are different. And how the different cards are knocked down. Sometimes you throw in a round shot card, ability to destroy it. Some of it is also a little anti-tactical. You need round shot to destroy the hull. So I'm going to make the borders card also use a round shot. So you really have to choose, what are you going to go after? Where are you going to use this round shot? Because it's late in the game and you might not have many round shot left. But and a couple of people, even like the artwork on the game box, someone's like, well, you have the flags going this way, but the smoke going that way. And it would really be like, yeah, okay,
But that you walked into that when you made a historical game, because you're going to get rivet counters out there. They're going to be like, there are this many rivets on the side of the ship.
Fortunately, nobody's taken me to task too much. And by and large, I think any Navy guy who's sat down to play has enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I was in Newport, Rhode Island. They have a tall ship there in the harbor. And I, had my business cards with me. And I made the pitch and I gave them the card. And when I got home, I had an order waiting for it. It's not miniatures. So, try to keep the costs down.
Yeah.
But, I think...
But this makes a lower entry. It lowers the entry point.
Oh, sure.
It's like it's a pretty quick game to get, and you're having fun. It's quick to learn. Like I said, we played. I think we played like about a half an hour. But we were playing the game then. There were still new things showing up that you were like explaining, but we were in it. So it's a great one you can get. And I know I was interested in what you're saying about kind of scaling it down for kids. Like it's not super complicated, but it sounds like you could maybe scale it down a little bit if you're playing with like younger kids, like 8, 10, 11-year-olds. Who do you see as like the target audience for this? Is there a particular age range you have in mind?
On the one hand, I've really enjoyed showing 8 to 12-year-olds, if they sit down with their parents. Mm-hmm. It is a family, so it's non-competitive, but especially when they get a couple turns in, when the child turns and says, Mom, you should do this, or no, don't do that, Mom, here, use this card. I'll give you this card, or something like that. There's lots of video games, and, I have 2 teenagers. They're, they weren't little in the age of the iPad and the phone, at least that came along a little more towards their early teens. So to have something that can capture, a tween or preteen's imagination, put the phone down, talk. You can talk while you're playing a game, but in this game, you have to talk with each other.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I mentioned. Like, okay, well, I'm going to do this because you won't be able to, or, to the person ahead of you. Well, can you please knock out that gun because I only have grape shot and I won't be able to. And I only have this cannon's already got 2 hits and it's going to take damage, so family interaction, very important. But at the same respect, when I was doing playtesting, one night I had 3 tables of adults in my house, running back and forth between the 3 of them, checking in. Yeah, they're all my friends and relatives, but they're also serious game players. And I've done demos at open game nights at stores too, and people enjoy themselves. They chat, they talk. They maybe, needle each other about what they did or what's going to happen to them, or sometimes I'm going to leave this cannon up for you for spite. So there's a little bit of competitiveness in there too. But so I'm thrilled that it does play throughout the ages. And like I mentioned earlier, I put in 9 difficulty levels, so you can play something small with a younger player. The other aspect of it is, so you've had your 3 cannons. If one of you lost all of your cannons, you have the ability to roll one of your guns over to them. So if mom and dad are playing with Junior and he, for whatever reason, is knocked out, he's going to go sulk in the corner.
We call that consequences.
Or he's going to pick up the phone and you've lost him for the evening. So you know what?
Yeah.
Roll a gun over. Make sure you give him a card each time he's taking a turn, and he's back in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So as part of your, part of the process development, I'm sure as you were building this game or your previous one, you're probably seeing a lot of other games, looking at a lot of games for inspiration. Sort of, what are the mechanics that kind of spoke to you that sort of led you to develop the game the way you did?
Oddly enough, I don't remember exactly what year it came out, but when people ask me what is my game similar to, the closest thing that I can think of is Castle Panic. I certainly didn't do as well as they did, but you are, and anybody who's not familiar with that game, you've got all the monsters are closing in on your castle, and depending on where they are, you can use a swordsman, a knight, or an archer to attack these monsters. And eventually they're going to get through and they're going to start knocking down your castle walls, and possibly you lose. So
I'm not hearing any cannons though.
What?
I'm not hearing any cannons in that game though. Come on.
But you have certain situations where you are using certain cards to get rid of your enemies. It is a war of attrition again.
Yeah.
In my game, really, it's a war of attrition. You're trying to outlast and get down to the end. Hopefully you're getting the right cards. You're trying to work together to get the right cards in the hands of the right person at the right time in order to maximize your team. And I will say, honestly, didn't really have awareness of that as I was working on it. And it wasn't until later when people started asking me to compare my game to something that I thought of all the games that I had and realized that was the closest one I could think of. As far as, trying to get inspiration of certain mechanics, I would say I was more inclined to try to avoid certain things. And that goes back to one of those play tests, the precipitous win or the precipitous loss, whichever way you want to look at it. I had played Pandemic a couple times. That is a cooperative game and really tough. I tried it with my siblings who played it a few times, and we lost very quickly both times after, and it still involved a lot of discussion. So I was like, all right, in that case, you're all unique contributors. So that meant you were limited, I guess, in what you could do individually. So I was like, well, you don't want everybody ganging up on, and I don't even remember, don't gang up on the doctor and the other 4 people are saying has to do this thing because he's the only one or whatnot. So in my game, everybody has their own cannons, and ultimately you're going to fire them or not fire them with whatever you want, at whatever you want, and you're more than welcome to discuss it. But at the end of the round or during your turn, you are doing what you want to do with your stuff. There's certainly games when you have 4 strangers playing and people might start commenting but so that was, the trying to avoid the quarterbacking and letting everybody kind of have their own similar decisions to make each turn, as opposed to really feeling boxed in. But then getting back to this precipitous win or lose. So originally, you could have 2, 3, or 4 stacks of cards on the ship. And in the first playtest, the people said, okay, well, if we always shoot at this one stack every turn, regardless of consequences, then pretty soon we're going to have 1 fewer stack of cards on the ship, and that'll be easier. And I was like, well, yeah, but you should work them all down evenly. And they said, no, that's not the best way to win this game. Now, it might not be the most enjoyable way to play the game,
Right.
but it's the best way to win the game. And that was, I will say, like a pivotal thing to fix. So I did come up with a way where you can do that if you want, but as it turns out, you can't get rid of all the cards in any stack. So you can get it down to one card, and actually those cards are the worst. So now the best way to play the game is the best way to win the game.
Makes sense.
And on top of that, having the worst cards at the bottom of the ship, and also you probably got these borders come out they're worse than cannons, so you can get down to almost winning, yet the ship has a way to try to beat you more quickly than it did before. So you can be in the home stretch but not win. And that was again something like, okay, well, we're almost done, so we're good. One person in Monopoly, they've got 15,000 and everybody else has $500 left. You're not coming back from that.
So let's talk a little bit about designing games. Now, you self-published this game and you brought it through Kickstarter. How big is your team for this game?
If you count the artist, 2.
Yeah. All right. So you're wearing a lot of different hats here. Now, we've talked to game designers, developers, and there's producers for these games. There's a whole cadre of other people in distribution, et cetera, all working together. What's maybe, in your mind, maybe the best and the worst thing about self-publishing a game?
The best thing, the best thing is creating it and thinking of new cards. Sketching them out. Will this work? Will it not work? As far as the self-publishing goes, I'm an engineer, so I deal with projects, but even then it was still mind-boggling how much was involved, and again, I'll definitely give cred or pay homage to Metatopia. Not only is it all the play testing, but it's also seminars all weekend long, where you get the game store owners, people who have done Kickstarter, artists, publishers, game company people, all these people giving like 1 hour classes, on, okay, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to know about if you're going to hire an artist. Do this, do this, do this, do this, watch out for that, blah, blah, blah. Here's what you have to consider when you're looking for a publisher, or, a printer. I make a distinction there, a printer. Okay, well, you could go here, you could go there, you could go small local, you could go somebody in China and they're going to need 1,000 and it's going to take you 4 months to get it or more, nowadays.
Right. Oh God.
How much is your game going to weigh? Because I had friends, they did great. And all of a sudden they realized, our game is over 2 pounds. So it's going to cost us more than what we thought it was going to ship. Oh, that's no good. Or FOB versus dock to stock, these things, all these details that come up when you're, and I thought I did a decent job, but it would have taken me a lot longer and cost me a lot more if I had not listened to all these people who, out of the kindness of their hearts, were trying to educate all these other people who had the same ideas that I did. And I also have to say, the community wants everybody to win, and I'm more than happy to, pay it back, pay it forward. Any of these game things, any of the conventions, there's always a couple of people every day who ask me those same questions you are. Like, what was it like? And, how long did it take? And what was your worst mistake? Yeah, my worst mistake was not budgeting properly. Things, certainly, it's going to cost you this much to get it to the ports. And then it's going to cost you to get it to fulfillment. And then they're going to charge you to ship it. And it's going to cost more or less to go to different places. And, you have people in England, in Europe. Well, so it's going to cost you from your one fulfillment center to ship it to the other fulfillment center, and taxes.
Oh, geez. The VAT tax. And
shipping in Europe is atrocious.
Which is funny because that might be a big audience too, right? When they're like, these like historical naval battles and you're seeing the English flag on some of the cards and you get, kind of a Napoleonic era.
Oh, sure.
In terms of playtesting, how do you go about getting the most out of finding people to test out your game, just sort of validate the game as you went along and developed it? Like, do you have the same crowd of people? Did you have one person that was kind of working pretty closely alongside you, sort of being kind of muse or inspiration, or just sort of a solid sounding board? How did you, what was your approach there?
All right. So there's some funny stories there. Anybody who has a significant other, you have to take a deep breath. And if your relationship can survive playtesting, more power to you. Like I said, you trained your son all summer to catch fly balls. And when he goes out there for his first game and he misses the game-winning run and everybody looks at you, it's tough. And I sat down with the Dragons game and with this game with my wife and my daughter, and you start trying to teach it. And then like, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? How come I can't do this? How come you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And, the knuckles turn white and the blood pressure starts rising. So now when I'm bringing something to her, I will say, I didn't proofread this. Mm-hmm. Do you like the layout of the card? Don't look at the word. It's like, or I did clip art. This is not the way the card will look. Do you understand the words? So we had to establish that between each other, just so that there were no hard feelings. Because what you don't want, everybody knows the movie My Cousin Vinny. He wants her to support him. So she's like, "Oh, that was so wonderful, the way the judge threw you in jail." No, you want, you need the harsh criticism. Yeah. But it can be really tough to take it from somebody who's typically there to support you.
Sure.
And you have to understand that in this situation, that is how they are supporting you. They are in effect protecting you from going outside and having lots of other people tell you the same thing. So that they're helping you. So that was certainly one of the first rounds. Like I said, I have a big family, so I still have my three brothers are all in the state, so they all tried it, and they all played games their whole life also. Yeah. So, I had a pretty good, cadre of testers. My youngest sister out of all of them is the most of an avid gamer. And, I had to create a special rule because of her. She broke the game to some extent. She figured out a loophole, I'll say.
Good.
I said you can roll a cannon over to somebody who's lost one. So in this night, I have 3 tables running. I'm running back and forth, and there were 4 players. 2 were knocked out. 1 was down to 2 cannons. 1 was down to 1. They weren't going to last. So I went back, checked on them. I come back. Now there's 1 person with 1 cannon. I'm like, okay, you'll be done in 5 minutes. I come back. There's still 1 person with 1 cannon. I said, how are you surviving? And she said, well, each turn we roll the cannon to the next player so that it can't get destroyed. And we hope to pull one of those cards where we can get a new cannon. And I'm like, well, that's not very good. That's not what was supposed
that's
to happen.
Good to catch, though, right? Good to catch it. That's that's awesome.
I put in I had to put in a rule. No, you can't roll away your last cannon. So that's the Jennifer rule.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
So you mentioned.
Oh, sorry. So, and then, like I said, these Unpub events, Metatopia, actually PAX Unplugged also has like a demo program. There's a couple other like in between shows. There's the Connecticut Festival of Independent Games, and there's the Boston Festival of Independent Games. I'll say those are for people who are a little further along. You're submitting a video, you're getting judged, there's a winner, there's best this, best that, what have you. So for those, if you take them seriously, you want to be as far along as you can. But it's Festival of Indie Gamers, so they're expecting to possibly have input.
Yeah. You have to give a lot. Like, you're not like one and done. What's the future look like for you?
Yeah, I also have to say, you said wear many hats. So you were there, if you show the video, I don't know, but there you go. You have to wear the hat. And for people who know me back then, for me to go to a show by myself, talk to a whole bunch of streeters, let them bear the slings and arrows and put on this goofy hat. The money doesn't matter compared to the personal growth. Learning how to do all that. Once you do it the first time, you're much more prepared trying to do it again. As it turns out, I got a family, I got a day job. So to start from scratch on something completely new and do the circuit again, it would take something for me to stumble into something very special to actually start all over again.
Were you working on expansions maybe, or were there other things in the work? It's still trickling in your mind?
Oh, yeah, sure. It's very hard sometimes, It's a quiet day at work, or you finish your sandwich early, and at lunch, and you're like, oh, I wonder about that. Or you happen to watch another, you watch another Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and you're like, that's an interesting little thing that happened there. So, and there were plenty of cards that didn't even make it into the game the first time around, just because it can only be so big. So I already knew, it'd be nice to do an expansion. As I mentioned earlier, the number one question I got was, where are the pirates? So I had my prepared answer, and that was, well, if I get funded on Kickstarter and the game gets published, I promise the first expansion will have pirates. So I stayed true to my promise. I kickstarted. Well, actually, the other thing was the playmats. I had originally just made them out of paper. They have a lot of the rules on them, and it looks neat because it's like a little ship. But to hit a certain price point and complexity and things like that and weight, I didn't put them in the game. So I had backers like, so what happened to the playmats? So a month, and also I just barely made my goal. It wasn't really as much as I had wanted.
And Kickstarter is like its own art, right? Like navigating that, yeah. And like...
I certainly had a decent number of people pledge who only saw it on Kickstarter. So it's, you're paying 9%, but it's basically advertising. You're paying for advertising. So a month later, I kickstarted the playmats, and that did much better than I expected. So it was nice to have that money to go really towards finishing the development of the original game.
I really like the playmats too.
Yeah, and
the deluxe components are always good.
Oh, sure. And another thing about my first go around and the evolution of Kickstarter, especially for games, my game was not done when I went to Kickstarter. I had all of the cards printed in one way or another. A lot of the artwork wasn't finalized. The backgrounds weren't finalized. So you might have, like a picture of a guy, but there's no background. Or I had used clip art, whatever free domain stuff that we knew we were going to replace. So I was like, okay, thanks. I should be shipping out in 6 months or something like that. And 6 months ultimately became 12 months when I fulfilled. Nowadays, it seems there's more and more of it's ready to ship. We've done all this, and that's especially, the people that have done this multiple times and maybe have a little more momentum. Certainly if you are the artist, that's a tremendous advantage. Or if at least there's an artist, like you said, on your team. So for Pirate Hunters, which was the one I did in September, in that case, I did want to have it done. So other than a couple errors that I had to fix, it was ready to go. I wanted to ship it in time for Christmas, didn't quite make it. It got out like first were right before New Year's, and the rest were sometime in January, and Europe got theirs in February. But it took a lot of the anxiety off knowing that, it was pretty much done. And that's really what I'm trying to do. So I really have cards written for 2 more packs, 2 more 54 card decks. The goal is to release one this September, kickstart again in September, and then kickstart again next year.
We'll mark our calendars.
Do I have to kickstart at this point? Probably not. I did pick up a few extra game sales when I had the expansion up. it does cost you a bit. There's certainly a feather in your cap to say how many successful campaigns you've had. 3, 3-0.
Nice. You gotta get wings, though. We gotta do.
So, and certainly the collecting of the money and the kind of like the finality of, okay, place your order, in effect, place your order by this date to ensure that I'm going to do it. Okay, I know I've got 50 copies sold. Okay, so I'll print 100 or 150 this time around. And, as opposed to just saying, okay, it's for sale now. And then like, well, so how many do I order? And what if people don't like this one? And then I'm stuck with all 150, 145 copies that I ordered. So it's nice to kind of, have the deadline, at least know what you've got covered, and then order, however many more you think you might sell over the next 15, 20 years.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on here to talk with us. And, once again, I want to say, like, we went to Captain Con. I did not go to that con thinking I would play anything but war games. I went up there. Bryan, you're doing a War Machine tournament. We got to do a demo of Conquest, which is another big miniature game. And like I said, driving home, the game I was thinking about was actually your game. And, I hear you talking about how you had to do this on your own. You had to go into the play testing. There's a certain sort of like level of social exhaustion of maybe having to stand there at a con as people come by, either walking by and watching them walk by, or coming by and being like, all right, let's do a demo game. And then like, and another demo game and another demo game. And, I was really impressed. And if it's anything, I hope it's, you feel seen in that moment, because, that was fantastic. And I think you got a great game here. And I'm actually really looking forward to getting that Kickstarter notification that you're going to do, right? Because you're going to kickstart it September. And that'll be on our radar. And if people want to check out more about your game, is the best place to find you at crispygamesco.com?
Yes. That's pretty much the moniker that I have for everything. So I don't really tweet that much anymore. Once you're doing a show or something like that, you might, put out a few pictures, or Instagram, but Facebook and the website. So Facebook is also just Crispy Games CO. And on the website, you'll see my backstory. You'll see, links to different playthroughs. You can, I'm pretty sure I have the Kickstarter video there. You can also just go on Kickstarter, search for Clear the Decks. I believe you can pull up past campaigns, so you'll see the videos there as well. But YouTube, you can search for Clear the Decks also. And I have a couple playthrough videos there. I'm a by the book guy, so I'm not I'll say it's not super flashy. I'm very dry, and I'm explaining how the game is played and what is in there. So
gotta get that information.
If you're looking for the exciting presentation, then you need to go to Pirates Parlay. He's a guy out in Vegas.
Yahar.
Fully dressed, whole garage studio, and I found him online, and I sent him copies of the base game. He's one of those guys, if he finds something he likes, he does a pitch video for you. And it was phenomenal both times. And with the expansion even, I was like, damn, I wish I did that.
I saw his videos, yeah.
You do this and you do this. And he's like, no, blah, 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 so, best advertisement for my game are his videos.
Fantastic.
And they're all linked on the website.
Well, that's it is. If you're going to be at PAX Unplugged it's been a couple of years since we've been now because of COVID. If things are back up and running, fingers crossed, let's make sure we cross paths. We'll be down there with some cameras and stuff. We do media passes down there.
I did.
And we'll come see you.
I elbowed my way through the kindness of strangers into a booth there this past year. Was by far the best show I had ever been to, and as a single person, occasionally I've been able to drag friends or something to be in a booth with me. That's a 3-day
Yeah, you got to
show.
get a crew. You got to, you got to captain the ship.
Yeah.
I'm out there rowing the oars.
And, you're halfway into a pitch with people at the table, and then you see somebody slow down and start looking at you also. And, if you had a second person there, or space for a second demo table, the guy that was helping me, he's like, it's like, you could have sold twice as many. I don't know about twice as many, but you could have sold more. I didn't have the demo pack. I think I probably would have sold one expansion with almost every copy that I sold. So I'm certainly gonna go and get my own booth at PAX Unplugged. It is a hobby, but you don't want to you can't throw endless amounts of money at it. So, doing something like CT Fig, that's like a 3-day show and you have to set up the day before. And so that's like 4 nights of hotels plus the booth money. That gets expensive. So these smaller shows, I think they, are learning that, it costs us a lot of money. Even Captain Con, the town charges you $50 a day for a sales certificate.
Jeez.
Like, really?
Yeah.
And then you throw in hotel and travel and all that. So I think I actually came out ahead at that one. You mentioned like standing there and watching people go by. That's almost every Sunday at any of these.
Oh.
People are exhausted. They get up late. They had something they wanted to do, or they have that Sunday tournament that's the only reason they're sticking around. So like even at Captain Con, I could have saved one hotel's night stay, 1 day's worth of sales certificate, and I would, that would have been cash in my pocket as opposed to being there that third day.
And with small games, it's small margins, right? You got to be careful about this stuff. So if people see you at either of these events, you got to make sure they come on over, say hi, and get in a demo game of this.
Yep.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it sells itself, but sit down, play a game, check this out. And, you were talking about also you are doing a little bit of a mentorship, having gone through the school of hard knocks and learned everything the hard way. People are trying to make their own games. It sounds like you're giving some advice there. So if they wanted to reach out to you, they can go out to your social media sites and your website. And I don't know if you're up for doing more consulting. How's that sound?
I'm very reasonable. I have very reasonable rates.
All right. Fair enough. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And for everybody listening, go check this game out. And we hope you get it on the table.